a freezing winter storm, an abandoned bus shelter, and an 8-year-old boy desperately trying to keep his baby sister alive. When millionaire farmer Ethan Carter stopped his truck that night, he thought he was helping 2 strangers. He had no idea that one simple act of kindness would change all 4 of their lives forever. Stay until the end, because what happened in family court 1 year later left everyone in tears. The winter wind howled across the countryside, sweeping over empty fields and rattling the bare branches of ancient oak trees. Most people in Willow Creek had already gone home. The roads were quiet, the shops were closing, and the temperature continued to fall. Ethan Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he drove his pickup truck along the county road. At 39 years old, Ethan was one of the wealthiest men in the region. His agricultural company supplied farms across several states. His success story had appeared in magazines. Business schools had invited him to speak. Local newspapers regularly featured him as an example of determination and leadership. Yet none of those accomplishments made his evenings easier. Success had filled his bank account. It had not filled his heart. 4 years earlier, his marriage had ended. His daughter Sophie now lived hundreds of miles away with her mother. The large farmhouse that once echoed with laughter had become painfully quiet. Every evening felt exactly the same. Work, dinner alone, silence, then sleep, and tonight seemed no different until he noticed something unusual. Ahead, near an old bus shelter at the edge of town, stood a small figure. Then he noticed another. Ethan slowed down. His headlights illuminated the shelter. What he saw immediately made his stomach tighten. A young boy stood there shivering. In his arms was a baby. Neither child appeared dressed for the freezing weather. Ethan pulled over. For a moment he simply stared. The rain had turned to icy sleet. The wind was brutal. No child should have been outside, especially not with a baby. He stepped out of the truck. The cold air hit him instantly. As he approached, the boy looked up. Fear filled his eyes, but beneath that fear was something even stronger: desperation. "Sir," his voice barely carried above the wind, "my little sister is so cold." Ethan's heart sank. The baby looked pale, far too pale. Tiny hands peeked from beneath a thin blanket. They were red from exposure. The infant let out a weak cry. The sound was barely audible. "What's your name?" Ethan asked gently. "Noah. And your sister, Lily. Where are your parents?" Noah looked away. For several seconds he didn't answer. Then he whispered something that made Ethan's blood run cold. "Mom left yesterday." Ethan blinked. "Yesterday?" Noah nodded. "She told us to wait here." The boy swallowed hard. "She said she'd come back." A lump formed in Ethan's throat. The child had been waiting almost an entire day. In freezing temperatures. Holding a baby. Alone. Without hesitation, Ethan removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around both children. The oversized coat nearly covered them completely. Noah looked surprised. "Aren't you cold now?" "I'll be fine." Ethan crouched beside him. "But your sister won't be if we stay here any longer." The boy looked uncertain. Every child was taught not to trust strangers. Ethan understood that, so he spoke carefully. "My name is Ethan." Noah studied him. "You don't have to trust me immediately." He pointed toward the truck. "But Lily needs warmth right now." For a long moment Noah hesitated. Then he looked down at his baby sister. Finally, he nodded. "Okay." As they climbed into the truck, Ethan had no idea that this single decision would change all of their lives forever. The heater blasted warm air during the drive. Noah sat quietly in the passenger seat holding Lily. His small body trembled from exhaustion. Several times Ethan caught him struggling to stay awake. Yet each time the boy's eyes drifted closed, he immediately looked at Lily to make sure she was okay. Protecting her, watching her, loving her. No child should have carried that kind of responsibility, and yet Noah carried it naturally. 15 minutes later they arrived at Ethan's farmhouse. The lights glowed warmly against the darkness. Mrs. Jenkins, Ethan's longtime housekeeper, opened the door. Her eyes widened. "Ethan, what happened?" "Long story." He hurried inside. "Right now these children need help." Within minutes blankets appeared. Warm clothes were found. Hot soup was prepared. Lily was carefully wrapped near the fireplace. Noah sat on the couch staring into the flames. The expression on his face broke Ethan's heart. The boy looked relieved, but he also looked exhausted beyond words, as if he had spent months carrying a burden too heavy for someone his age. Ethan immediately called emergency medical services. When the paramedics arrived, they examined both children thoroughly. Their findings were serious. Lily was suffering from mild hypothermia and dehydration. Noah had early signs of frostbite on several fingers. Fortunately, they had been found in time. Another few hours outside could have ended very differently. Those words haunted Ethan long after the paramedics left. That night Noah refused to sleep. Every time Ethan checked on him, the boy sat beside Lily's crib, watching, protecting, waiting. Finally, Ethan entered the room and sat beside him. "You should get some rest." Noah shook his head. "What if she cries? I'll hear her. What if she gets cold? I'll make sure she stays warm. What if she wakes up scared?" Ethan smiled softly. "Then we'll both help her." The boy was quiet. Then he asked something unexpected. "Why are you helping us?" Ethan froze. The question seemed simple, but beneath it was years of disappointment. Years of broken promises, years of adults letting him down. The child genuinely didn't understand why someone would help without expecting something in return. Ethan thought carefully before answering. Then he said the truth. Because somebody should. For the first time since arriving, Noah cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears rolling down his cheeks. And Ethan realized this wasn't simply a child who had been abandoned. This was a child who had been carrying fear for far too long. The following days brought answers. Authorities eventually located the children's mother. Her name was Rebecca. She had struggled with addiction for years. Recently, she had relapsed. When police found her, she was several towns away, confused, ashamed, and devastated by what she had done. The courts quickly became involved. Rebecca agreed to enter a rehabilitation program. Until she could prove stability and recovery, Noah and Lily needed temporary placement. That created a new problem. Most available foster homes only had room for one child. Separating siblings happened more often than people realized. When Noah learned this possibility, panic filled his face. "No," he hugged Lily tightly. "No, no, no." The social worker knelt beside him. "We're trying our best." "No," tears streamed down his cheeks. "She's my sister." The room fell silent. Ethan watched from across the office. Something twisted painfully inside his chest. He had known these children for less than 2 weeks, yet the thought of separating them felt wrong, completely wrong. That evening he sat alone in his study. The social worker's words echoed repeatedly in his mind. Limited placements, temporary housing, sibling separation. Practical, efficient, necessary, but somehow none of those words felt right. Finally, Ethan picked up his phone and made a decision, one that surprised even himself. He called his attorney, then the social worker, then the family court office. "I'd like to apply for temporary guardianship." Silence followed. Then questions, lots of questions. Was he prepared? Did he understand the responsibility? Did he realize how difficult trauma recovery could be? Ethan answered every question honestly. No, he wasn't fully prepared. No one ever was. But he knew one thing with certainty. Those children needed stability, and he could provide it. The approval process took weeks. Background checks, interviews, home inspections, financial evaluations, psychological assessments. Yet eventually everything was approved. For the first time since arriving at the farmhouse, Noah looked genuinely happy, and slowly life began to change. For everyone. Ethan learned how to help with homework again. He learned how many bottles a baby could go through in one day. He learned how many questions an 8-year-old could ask before breakfast. And surprisingly, he loved every minute of it. The following months transformed the Carter farmhouse in ways Ethan never imagined possible. For years, the large house had been quiet, except for the occasional visit from employees or business associates. Now laughter echoed through the hallways. Tiny toys appeared in unexpected places. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. Every morning Noah raced downstairs with a new question about science, space, animals, or farming, while little Lily greeted everyone with cheerful giggles. For the first time since his divorce, Ethan no longer dreaded coming home at the end of the day. Home finally felt alive again. As spring approached, Noah started attending the local elementary school. At first, he struggled to fit in. The other children knew pieces of his story because adults in town had talked about it. Some students treated him differently. A few whispered behind his back. One afternoon, Noah came home unusually quiet. During dinner, he barely touched his food. Ethan eventually persuaded him to talk. Noah admitted that several boys had made fun of him for being abandoned by his mother. The words had hurt more than he wanted to admit. Ethan listened carefully before responding. He explained that other people's cruelty often came from ignorance rather than truth. What happened to Noah was not a reflection of his worth. It was the result of adult failures. Slowly, Noah began to understand that he wasn't responsible for the mistakes that had shaped his early childhood. Meanwhile, Lily continued growing stronger every day. Her health improved dramatically, and her bright personality quickly won over everyone she met. Even Mrs. Jenkins, who rarely showed emotion, found herself smiling whenever Lily reached for her. Yet just as life seemed to be settling into a comfortable routine, another challenge arrived. One night, Lily developed a high fever. Within hours, she became lethargic and unusually quiet. The memory of finding her freezing at the bus shelter rushed back into Ethan's mind. Fear gripped him as he drove her to the hospital. Noah sat beside her the entire journey, holding her tiny hand and whispering encouragement. Thankfully, doctors diagnosed a serious but treatable infection. After several anxious days of treatment, Lily recovered fully. However, the experience strengthened the bond between Ethan and the children. For the first time, Noah openly admitted he considered Ethan family. As summer arrived, Rebecca continued working through rehabilitation. The process was far from easy. There were setbacks, emotional breakdowns, counseling sessions, and difficult confrontations with her past. Yet despite every obstacle, she refused to quit. She attended every program required by the court and slowly rebuilt her life one day at a time. Most importantly, she never stopped thinking about Noah and Lily. Every week she wrote letters to them. At first, Noah refused to read them. The pain of being abandoned still felt too fresh, but eventually curiosity overcame anger. One evening, Ethan found Noah quietly reading a stack of letters in his bedroom. The boy's eyes were filled with tears. Rebecca had written about her mistakes, her guilt, and her determination to become the mother her children deserved. For the first time, Noah began seeing her not as a villain, but as a deeply flawed person fighting to change. Several months later, the court approved supervised visits. The first meeting took place in a family services center. Rebecca looked healthier than she had in years, but she appeared terrified. Her hands trembled as she entered the room. Noah stood frozen beside Ethan. Lily, now old enough to walk, stared curiously at the woman she barely remembered. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Then Rebecca dropped to her knees and began crying. She apologized over and over, unable to find enough words to express her regret. Noah didn't know how to respond. Part of him wanted to run into her arms. Another part wanted to protect himself from being hurt again. Eventually, he stepped forward and hugged her. The room filled with tears. Even Ethan struggled to keep his emotions under control as he watched a broken family begin the long process of healing. Over the next year, Rebecca continued proving herself. She maintained sobriety, secured stable employment, rented a small home, and faithfully attended counseling. Social workers monitored her progress closely and consistently reported positive results. Meanwhile, Noah thrived academically. His love of science earned him recognition at school, and he eventually won a regional science competition. Ethan sat proudly in the audience as Noah accepted his award. Later that evening, Noah surprised him with a heartfelt statement. He explained that none of his achievements would have been possible without the opportunities Ethan had given him. Ethan reminded him that talent and determination belonged to Noah alone. All he had done was provide a safe place to grow. Eventually, the day everyone knew was coming finally arrived. The family court scheduled a final hearing to determine whether Noah and Lily could return to their mother's care permanently. The courtroom was filled with nervous anticipation. Rebecca sat quietly beside her attorney. Ethan sat with Noah and Lily. Social workers presented reports. Therapists offered recommendations. Evidence showed that Rebecca had maintained her recovery for an extended period and had successfully completed every requirement established by the court. When the judge finally delivered her decision, tears immediately appeared in Rebecca's eyes. Reunification was approved. Although everyone had hoped for that outcome, the reality of it felt bittersweet. Ethan was genuinely happy for Rebecca and the children, yet he couldn't ignore the ache growing inside his chest. The farmhouse had become a home again because of Noah and Lily. The thought of seeing their rooms empty was painful. During the weeks leading up to the move, he focused on helping the family prepare. He purchased furniture for Rebecca's new house, helped transport belongings, and made sure everything was ready for the children's arrival. The morning of the move arrived faster than anyone expected. Boxes lined the farmhouse hallway. Lily happily wandered between them, unaware of the emotional weight surrounding the day. Noah stood quietly outside on the porch with Ethan. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Noah broke the silence. He admitted that he was excited to live with his mother again, but scared to leave the place that had become his second home. Ethan understood completely. He told Noah that family was not defined solely by where people lived. Family was built through love, trust, and commitment. Those things would never disappear. Then Noah handed Ethan a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph taken several months earlier. It showed Ethan sitting between Noah and Lily during a picnic at the farm. Across the bottom, written in careful handwriting, were words Ethan would treasure forever. "Thank you for stopping that night." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Before he could respond, Noah hugged him tightly. "You saved us." Ethan shook his head. "No, Noah." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You saved your sister. You were brave enough to ask for help when it mattered most." Soon afterward, Rebecca arrived. The final goodbye was emotional for everyone, yet it wasn't truly a goodbye. Promises were made to stay in touch. Visits were planned. Phone calls were scheduled. As Rebecca drove away with Noah and Lily, Ethan stood on the porch watching until the vehicle disappeared beyond the fields. The farmhouse felt quiet again that evening, but it wasn't the same kind of loneliness he had known before. This time, the silence carried gratitude rather than emptiness. The children had changed him. They had reminded him that success meant little if it wasn't used to help others. They had shown him that family could appear when least expected, and in forms nobody could predict. Years later, Noah would graduate at the top of his class and earn a scholarship to study engineering. Lily would grow into a confident, kind young woman who never forgot the man who had sheltered her when she was too young to remember it herself. Rebecca remained sober and continued rebuilding her life, and Ethan remained a constant presence in all their lives, attending birthdays, graduations, holidays, and family celebrations. Whenever people praised Ethan for what he had done, he always responded the same way. "I didn't rescue those children." Then he would smile and look toward the horizon. "They rescued me." Because on one freezing winter night, a frightened little boy had found the courage to ask a stranger for help. And in doing so, he changed 4 lives forever.